For each fight on this weekend's upcoming card, including for the prelims, I'm going to be comparing stats, reviewing recent fighter history, analyzing the results of my 7 data science prediction models, and giving a combined weighted prediction based on those models. I'll also provide my final prediction combining both quantitative and qualitative information together. Later this week, I'll upload a video covering promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, and prop bets for y'all to consider, which I'll highlight some great opportunities for you guys. Hopefully you can use these predictions and data to confirm your picks, avoid mistakes, find value bets, or just informative and entertainment purposes to prepare for the lead up to this weekend's event. Please like and subscribe if you find this content interesting, informative, or helpful. It helps keep me motivated to create these videos for you all. I've also added my Patreon information in the description if you'd like to support the channel through that. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier, which will give you early access to all of the analysis and results for my videos, as well as additional data analysis and stats. So that includes my prediction model results, fighter history, stat overviews, promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, prop bets to consider, and a deep dive into each fighter's record history and an analysis through each of their individual historical fights. So you'll get all sorts of stats and data analysis which will help you with your picks and bets. And for $20 a month, which is around $5 per event, you can get all of that information. You can purchase event analysis separately, but the membership is cheaper and easier. Plus, you're directly helping improve and expand the content of this channel. Running this data and analysis, each of the prediction models, the fight simulations, and updating the site takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate your support. And thank you all for the recent support that you have shown. It truly means the world to me that we can share our passion for MMA and continue to build this community together. The last thing that I want to mention is that there is a BetUS promotion in the description below. If you use that link, it's an affiliate link, so if you set up your account, you'll get a promotional offer with that. I'm excited to continue working on this analysis and content for you all. Thank you guys again for all of your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into the predictions. UFC 310 is this weekend and it is an absolute banger of a card. We have Alexander Pantoja versus former Rizin champion Kai Asakura, who actually gave up his championship to join the UFC, make his debut, and fight immediately the champion Pantoja. For our co-main event, we have the people's main event, essentially. We have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry. Very interesting fight. One of those O's have to go. Both of those guys are undefeated. Very interesting fight. Then we have Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov. Another very interesting and high-stakes fight. All in all, the card is very exciting. I can't wait to cover it head to toe. But first, real quick update for you guys. As you can see, I heard what you guys really wanted, what you guys were requesting. You guys wanted me to display the model results, so I am displaying all of the model results at the very top, and also I am displaying their average and then my final prediction, which takes the statistical readings, but I also incorporates human input. I review the fights, I look at historical fights, I look at research, injuries, momentum, streaks, all sorts of information, training camps, weight issues, all of that kind of stuff, and then I adjust the statistical reading to incorporate that qualitative information. So I'm displaying all that for you guys now, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. For the first fight, we have Nzechukwu versus Brzeski. Now for this fight, all things considered, I did end up leaning towards Kennedy here, and I ended up giving him a 73.66% probability of victory. Now the prediction models, they were giving him a 72% probability of victory. Now the statistical reason why I do like Kennedy in this matchup, keep in mind he has a height advantage of 1 inch here, he has a reach advantage of 5 inches, while also landing 0.44 more strikes per minute than his opponent here, and he lands 0.12 more takedowns on average as well, and he also has a 44% higher takedown defense. Now Kennedy's total record, if we just take a look at the guy's record, 13 wins, 5 losses. Let's break that down real quick. Out of his 13 wins, 9 of those were KOs/TKOs, 1 of those was a submission, and only 3 were decision victories, giving the guy a 77% finish rate, pretty respectable. Now his 5 losses, 2 of those were KOs/TKOs, 1 was a submission loss, and 2 were decision losses. Now keep in mind, although he does have a lot of finishes, only 3 of those finishes were in the very first round, so he is fully capable of finishing fights in the second and third rounds. Now recently, if we take a look at his momentum, he's won 3 of his last 5 fights, which is pretty good, and he's coming off of a win into this particular fight, so he's carrying a lot of momentum with him. Now his most recent win was in October of 2024, just a couple months ago, and his most recent loss was back in March of this year. He's a pretty active fighter. Now if you're new to the channel, what what I don't like to do is just give you guys stats. What I like to do is give you guys the stats, but also give you the stylistic reasons why I'm picking certain fighters. And I'm going to share all my research with you guys. So for this fight, the reason that I like Kennedy, first of all, from a physical advantage standpoint, I like his size and reach advantage overall. I touched base a little bit on that previously, but I will also say Kennedy's one of those guys that is pretty athletic. I mean, if you've seen his fights, especially his previous fights, you can see that he has that superior athleticism and he has good power as well, especially compared to his opponent here, Lukasz. Not only does he have that physical advantage, but he's also really good with his striking skills. He combines that power really well with his range control. He really leans into his reach advantage, which I like, especially when I look at his previous fight film. And I think that he can really keep Lukasz at a good distance and continue to pick him apart with strikes. Not only that, but what I like about Kennedy is his ability to capitalize on his opponent's vulnerabilities. For example, when it comes to takedown defense, Lukasz, he kind of struggles with takedown defense, and I think that Kennedy has the ability to kind of exploit that if he chooses to mix in a little bit of grappling in this fight, which I can see happen. Also, I like Kennedy's striking defense. I mean, Lukasz, he's shown defensive lapses, and we've seen him with that KO loss to, who was it? It was Michael Parkin. And so, with that kind of stuff, I just think he's a little bit more aware as a fighter when I've seen both of these guys, compared to each other. Now, strategically, I think what Kennedy has to do, again, he has to maintain his distance and use that jab and that long-range style of striking to keep Lukasz at bay. He also, while doing that, has to look for those powerful counter strikes, which I think he's going to be able to do, especially when Lukasz tries to close the gap, inevitably. Now, along with that, if he mixes in those takedown attempts to keep Lukasz guessing a little bit, then he could exploit that weaker ground game. Lastly, I would say that he really has to push a high pace in order to test Lukasz's cardio, and that's been a little bit questionable in his past fights. I think that Kennedy is going to look for that TKO finish, very similar to that victory that he recently had over Chris Barnett, and I think he's going to look to finish the fight either in that first or second round, and he's going to do so by leveraging those advantages that we just discussed. So the final verdict for this fight, logically speaking, it's going to be Kennedy via KO/TKO. For the next fight, we have the veteran Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. Now, for this fight, I did end up going with Chase Hooper here, and I did end up giving him a 79% probability of victory. Now, the prediction models, they generally agreed. They ended up giving him a 75% probability of victory. Now, the statistical reason why I'm picking Chase Hooper is because he does have that height advantage of 6 inches. He's also 18 years younger than Clay Guida here. He also has a reach advantage of 4 inches. He lands 2.44 more strikes per minute than Clay does. He has a 19% higher striking accuracy along with that, and he also lands 1.7 more submissions on average. This kid, just on paper, is better at different angles than Clay here. Now, his total record, and I'm talking about Chase Hooper, total record is 14 wins and only 3 losses. Out of those 14 wins, 4 of those were KO/TKOs, 7 of those were submissions, and the remaining 3 were decision victories, which gives him a very high 79% finishing rate. Out of his 3 losses, 1 of those were a KO/TKO, and 2 were decision losses. Now, Chase Hooper, he does have 6 first-round finishes out of his 14 wins. Recently, he's been on an absolute tear. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights, and he's actually on a 3-fight win streak coming into this fight. His most recent win was just a few months ago, back in May of this year, and his most recent loss was actually back in October of 2022. So let's talk about the qualitative and stylistic advantages that Chase Hooper has. Now, first thing that I want to mention to you guys, important context for this matchup, these two have actually faced off before. Now, it wasn't in your traditional MMA matchup. What it was a grappling match, and Chase Hooper actually defeated Clay Guida, and this was back in 2022. So Hooper defeated Clay, and that was via calf slicer. So Hooper's already shown technical expertise and just, having the upper hand when it comes to the grappling department and the submission department against Clay. Now, that paired with his statistical advantages, it's not looking too good for Clay. Also, when you consider Clay's age, that just kind of drags his chances a little bit further back. That, along with Chase Hooper's really slick jiu-jitsu skills and his unorthodox style, I mean, that's really what's helped him secure a lot of his wins via stoppage. I also really like what I see out of Chase Hooper in terms of striking as well, and I think that he is the sharper striker compared to Clay, at least at this point in Clay's career. I mean, Clay's one of those guys where he'll scrap when he needs to, and he'll brawl, and he'll make it tough, and, he'll win. It's not like he doesn't have it in him. But when you consider logically the advantages in this matchup, Chase Hooper should have this. Now, I think tactically what Chase really needs to do, he needs to initiate those messy scrambles that Clay might struggle in handling, where Chase Hooper will shine. Now, Chase Hooper also has to really lean into his 4-inch height advantage here and his reach advantage in order to control the distance and really just control Clay as he wants in that octagon. He also has to exploit Clay's takedown attempts to set up those submissions where he's really going to excel. And so I will give Clay credit. I mean, he has great experience. He's a veteran of the sport. He also has a great wrestling background as well, and that should not be underestimated at all. Clay's one of those guys. He's a scrapper. He's also technical when he needs to be. He can get it done, but I really like Hooper's youth. I like his improving skill set. I like his technical expertise. And some of his previous success, especially against Clay 2 years ago in that grappling department, I think that that's really going to speak to his favor, not only technically, but also psychologically. I think it adds that component to this fight as well. So final verdict for this fight is Chase Hooper victory via submission. I think Clay Guida is going to lose again. For the next fight, we have Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin. Now for this fight, I'm rooting for Max Griffin. I think he's logically going to win. I ended up giving him a 64.4% final probability of victory, and the prediction models generally agreed. They gave him a 67.7% probability of victory. Now let's talk about the statistical advantages Max Griffin has. He has a reach advantage of 1 inch here. He lands 2.06 more strikes per minute with a 9% higher striking accuracy. He also has a 4% higher striking defense as well. So not only does he have a lot of output, but he is a better defensive player when it comes to the striking department, at least on paper. And he does have a 9% higher takedown defense as well. Now, if we take a look at Max Griffin's total record here, he has 20 wins and 10 losses. Let's break that down real quick. Out of those 20 wins, 9 of those were KO/TKOs, 2 were submissions, and the remaining 9 were decision victories. Pretty balanced overall. It gives him a 55% finish rate. Let's break down his 10 losses real quick. 1 of those was a KO/TKO, and the other 9 were decision losses. Now, he does have 7 first-round finishes out of his 20 wins. Recently, he's done well. He's won 3 of his last 5 fights, and he's coming off of a win into this fight. His most recent win was early in this year. It was in February of this year, and his most recent loss was back in July of last year. Now, what I like about Max Griffin here, I do like his striking skills. I think a lot of his advantages actually lie in his striking abilities. Now, he's a pretty powerful boxer overall. He possesses those skills that kind of keeps the fight standing, and then he lands those significant blows that really puts the fight in his favor. Now, Chiesa, he's really known for his grappling. If you take a look at his career and his skill set, I think he's going to kind of struggle to contend with Griffin's striking if this fight continues to remain on the feet, which Griffin is really good at keeping the fight on the feet. Now, let's talk recent performance here. Now, Chiesa is coming off that win against Tony Ferguson, and it's worth noting that he had a bit of a rough patch before that victory, and it's hard to tell if he fully shook that off. I mean, Tony Ferguson, it's not the flex that you think it is at this stage to defeat Tony Ferguson. We all know he's on the decline, respectfully, and that just, it doesn't convince me that Chiesa, has broken that and shaken it off. Now, what I will also say is that Griffin, we know he has that knockout power, and he's had it throughout his career. A lot of his wins have came via KO or striking control, and I think that that's important. It's going to be very crucial, especially in this fight. If he can catch Chiesa a little bit early, then that's definitely going to take a toll on him. What I also like about Griffin is his defensive wrestling. He'll really have to lean into that in order to keep the fight standing, because if he can stuff those takedown attempts, then he'll, of course, force the fight to stay on the feet, and that's where he's going to keep the fight in his preferred striking range. Whereas if Chiesa is able to take him down, well then, the needle starts moving a little bit in Chiesa's favor, because that's his department. Now, one thing I will say, Griffin is 38 years old, and I do acknowledge that, but he's in a really good shape. Now, Chiesa, he's dealt with some injuries in the past, including like that back injury that really affected his performance. And if Griffin's conditioning is truly superior, then he could potentially outlast Chiesa in a longer fight if it extends, right? The only other things that I really want to say about this fight is that in terms of like momentum, Griffin, he kind of sees this fight as a huge fight in his career, and definitely a stepping stone towards a title run. He said this. Now, that kind of motivation combined with his that kind of split decision victory over someone like Jeremiah Wells, I think that's going to provide momentum and the encouragement to overcome someone like Chiesa. So just to summarize, what Max Griffin really has to do, and what he's good at, is keep the fight standing, utilize those boxing skills, and look for that KO. Based on his power, his recent form, and his motivation to make him a very challenging opponent, I think he has what it takes to handle Chiesa and give him a defeat if he can execute that game plan very well, which I do expect him to do logically. So, verdict for this fight, Max Griffin via decision is what I'm leaning towards, but there is a decent chance that he kind of surprises people and gets that KO/TKO. That would not shock me at all. Regardless, Max Griffin is your guy. For the next fight, we have Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. I ended up going with Joshua Van. I actually really enjoy watching him fight. The guy was on an absolute tear, but then he ended up losing to Charles Johnson. And what a fight that was, by the way. Definitely recommend you guys go back and watch that one. Now, here's the thing. All things considered, I did end up going with Joshua Van. I ended up giving him a 59.45% probability of victory. And the prediction models, they pretty much predicted the same exact thing. And let me talk about the advantages here. Statistically, why I like Joshua Van, keep in mind, he's 10 years younger than his opponent here. He lands 5.04 more strikes per minute. That's a hell of a lot more volume per minute. He's also 3% more accurate with those, and he has an 8% higher striking defense as well. I really like those stats. Now, he also has a 13% higher takedown accuracy and a 10% higher takedown defense as well. Let's just take a look at his record, Joshua Van's. He's had 11 wins and only 2 losses. Out of those 11 wins, 6 of those were KO/TKOs, 2 of those were submissions, and 3 were decision victories, which gives the guy a 73% finishing rate. He's pretty exciting to watch. Now let's talk about his losses. He only has 1 KO/TKO loss and 1 submission loss, no decision losses. He has 2 first-round finishes out of his 11 wins, which shows that he really stays in the fight and he can pour it on in the second and third round to get that finish. In fact, recently he's won 4 of his last 5 fights, which is pretty impressive, and he's coming off of a win into this fight, and he kind of like took his power back. He defeated Edgar Chairez, and that was via unanimous decision. It went all 3 rounds. This was back in UFC 306 in Riyadh. But anyways, the most recent win that Joshua Van had was back in September of 2024, and then just a couple months before that, he had his most recent loss. That was back in July. But before that, his most recent loss was all the way back in December 2021, and that was against Devin Jackson, and that was a rear naked choke submission in that second round. Now let's talk about the stylistic things that make me really lean towards Joshua Van in this fight. The first thing that I would say is his striking skills. I really like the accuracy with which Joshua Van fights. If you look at his previous fights, you can tell that he not only effectively uses his striking, but he's very accurate with it as well. And I think that that kind of precision is going to be crucial in landing those significant strikes and securing that knockout or just wearing his opponent down. Not only that, but what I really like about Van is he chases after those combinations. He not only just, sticks with the 1 and the 1-2, but he strings together really effective combinations. He does the 1-2-3. He continues pouring it on, and you see that in his volume stats, but that also translates very well when it comes to fights. He has that kind of offensive mindset that I really like to see in a fighter, that aggressive style that I love seeing in fighters. He uses that forward pressure really well, and not only that, but he has that finishing mentality. He really looks to finish fights and quickly. In fact, he said himself that he likes to knock out his opponents as fast as possible, and I love that aggressive approach because that really keeps your opponent very uncomfortable in the octagon. There's so much pressure that you already face as a fighter in the cage, and so if your opponent is one of those guys that is looking to end it and end it ASAP, he's hungry for that victory, Joshua Van is that guy, and that really throws your game off as an opponent. Now, again, I mentioned that he's an active fighter, and I really, really like that. That just gives him a lot more confidence. It keeps him sharp. It keeps his form in peak. He's not Paddy the Baddy where he's gaining a bunch of weight, losing a bunch of weight, only fighting once every blah, blah, blah. No hate to Paddy the Baddy, but you get what I'm saying, right? He's an active fighter. He stays in shape. His skills are improving. He's young. I like all of that. He's able to keep the fight standing. He utilizes his speed really well, and he takes advantage of his youth. He really shows that hunger. So all in all, I think that Joshua Van, I really don't think that he's going to be able to get the finish, but I definitely think he's going to pour the volume on like we've seen. He's going to wear down his opponent here, and he's eventually going to get that unanimous decision victory. Very dominant. He's going to put the hurt on Cody Durden here, and I can't wait to see this fight. For the next fight, we have our veteran, good old Chris Weidman versus Eryk Anderson. I can't wait for this fight. I did end up going with Chris Weidman here, even though he is the underdog. I am still going with him. Now, I ended up giving him a pretty conservative 52% probability of victory, all things considered, stats and outside of stats as well. But if you just look at the statistical model, I kind of like the reading. It ended up giving Chris Weidman a 49% probability of victory. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, MMA data guy, that's less than 50%, man. That's still bad. Listen, it's Chris Weidman, an underdog, and it's very close to that 50% mark. That's how you see and exploit an advantage. That's a good edge right there. And I like what I see from Chris Weidman, not only statistically, but also just stylistically. Even considering where he's at in his career right now, I still like Chris Weidman in this matchup. And I'll make my case, I'll defend it here. But first, let's talk about the statistical advantages that Chris Weidman has. Now, keep in mind, Chris Weidman has a height advantage of 1 inch in this matchup. He has a reach advantage of 3 inches, which is important. He also absorbs 0.95 less strikes per minute, pretty much 1 less strike per minute. And he has a 1% higher striking defense. Now, more important than just that, he lands 1.65 more takedowns on average. He has a 16% higher takedown accuracy, and he lands 0.7 more submissions on average. Let's take a look at Chris Weidman's total record for a second. He has 16 wins and 7 losses. Out of those 16 wins, 6 of those were KO/TKOs, 4 were submissions, and 6 were decision victories. Very balanced fighter across the board in different aspects of MMA. In fact, he has a 63% finish rate, which I do respect. Out of his 7 losses, 6 of those were KO/TKOs, and 1 was a decision loss. He's never been submitted before. He does have 6 first-round finishes out of his 16 wins. Now, recently, I will admit, and I'll acknowledge, he's only won 2 of his last 5 fights. He hasn't been the most active guy. Of course, if you know his story and what he's been through, what he struggled with, then you know why he hasn't been very active. He's been struggling with injuries and stuff like that. But he is coming off of a win, just to give some of us some hope. In fact, his most recent win, that was back in March of this year, and his most recent loss was actually back in August of 2023. So he's put some time in between his most recent loss. Now, the things outside of stats alone that I really like about Chris Weidman, first and foremost, it has to be his experience and his fight IQ. Now, keep in mind, this is the former middleweight champ, and I think that that alone gives him a bit of an edge compared to Eryk here, especially in that IQ department, in that when it comes to implementing strategic game plans and things like that, or even outmaneuvering an opponent. I think Chris Weidman takes that piece of the analysis. Now, one thing that I like about Chris Weidman, which this is going to be very obvious, it is his grappling and his wrestling. He has a very strong wrestling background, and his grappling skills are very likely to be a key factor in this fight. I like his ability to control the pace of fights, and if he's able to potentially secure takedowns, I think that can neutralize Eryk's striking threat a little bit. I do like Chris Weidman's reach advantage as well. I think that that's going to help him keep Eryk at bay and control those striking exchanges from a bit of a safer distance, which is exactly what Chris needs. Now, recently speaking, in that fight against Bruno Silva, Weidman did show that he's improved in his striking department, and if he can bring that level of sharpness back again into this fight, especially in that stand-up portion of this fight, I think it could give him another slight edge against a guy like Eryk. So in summary, Chris Weidman, in order to win this fight, what I think he'll be able to do as well, it's going to be using that reach advantage to strike from the outside and then mix in those takedown attempts and kind of just keep Eryk guessing overall. And so I will say, and I do acknowledge, because I like to keep it transparent with you guys, while Chris Weidman does have those advantages, it is very important to note and keep in mind that Eryk does possess that knockout power, and he is the younger fighter as well. So Chris has to be very cautious and stick to a smart and strategic game plan, which I do think he has that fight IQ. He just has to really just be cautious in this fight. Now, that's why I did give him a conservative 52% probability of victory. I do think that that's a fair one. I am leaning towards Weidman. I do genuinely think he's going to win, but it's just a very conservative margin because I don't want to underestimate a guy like Eryk. Now, all things considered, the final verdict for this fight, Chris Weidman via decision. I don't think we're going to see a finish. I mean, it's respectfully, he is at the very late stage of his professional fighting career, and he's dealt with injuries and stuff. I think we're going to get a decision performance, maybe a split decision. That would be an interesting outcome, but eventually I do think Chris wins. For the next fight, we have Randy Brown versus Bryan Battle. This is an interesting matchup, and I am excited for this fight as well. I ended up going with Bryan Battle here. I give him a 68.85% probability victory, all things considered. The prediction models were a little bit more confident in him, just looking at the stats. They ended up giving him a 71.2% probability of victory, and here's the thing. Statistically, the reason I like Bryan, he is 4 years younger. He lands 1.06 more strikes per minute. He has a 7% higher striking accuracy as well, and he lands 0.24 more takedowns on average. I also really like this guy's record. He has 12 wins, only 2 losses. Out of those 12 wins, 4 of those were KO/TKOs, 6 were submissions, pretty impressive, and then 2 were decision victories. That pretty much keeps him balanced in different areas of MMA, and it also gives him an 83.4% finishing rate, which is really good. Now, out of his 2 losses, 1 was a submission loss and 1 was a decision loss. He does have 3 first round finishes out of his 12 wins, and he's also won 3 of his last 5 fights, which does give him good momentum. And on top of that, he is coming off of a win into this specific fight. Now, his most recent win was just a couple months ago, back in September of 2024. And his most recent loss was actually all the way back in December of 2022, so it has been a while. Now, what I like about Bryan Battle is his striking skills. He's really entertaining to watch, and he's a fun fighter to watch and keep up with. He's also very versatile. Like, we've seen him throw those devastating head kicks even a couple of years ago, and it's interesting to see him get victories the way he does. I mean, he has a very dynamic arsenal of punches, kicks, elbows, and he's very unpredictable. I'd hate to be his opponent in the octagon because he has these off-rhythm style combinations, and not only that, but he has excellent timing with those. And so when you see him choose his shots, which are very high level, and he lands them and they're devastating, it just makes him a very eccentric striker. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. The guy is very interesting. Now, I will say that Brown, he does have diverse striking techniques of his own. He is dominant when it comes to some fights as well, which makes this fight very entertaining and fun. Brown specifically is gonna look for those opportunities to land those powerful kicks and try to look for his own highlight reel style finish. But one of the things that I really like about Bryan Battle is, and one of his greatest assets in my opinion, is his ability to adapt during fights. He's shown that capability to adjust his game plan according to his opponent's style, whether he's facing strikers or wrestlers. I've seen it in both scenarios. So I really like his fight IQ, and I think that allows him to read his opponents very well, and we've seen that time and time again with his ability to sense when an opponent is looking for a way out, if you know what I mean. So against someone like Brown, I think that adaptability is going to be absolutely crucial. Battle is going to have to make very quick adjustments based on Brown's tactics. I do think this is going to be a very high-level fight, and it's interesting because I believe this is the first regular prelim of the night, and it's such a great fight, very underrated fight. And so all in all, just to summarize, I think that Bryan Battle is going to win this fight. I think he's going to get that finish that we're all looking for. It's going to be a KO/TKO finish. There is a good chance that Randy Brown catches him and kind of pulls off an upset. I think that is possible with a fighter like Randy Brown. I mean, I've seen some of his previous fights, and I do like what I see from him as well. I just think logically Bryan Battle is more likely to come out as the victor in this fight. For the next fight, we have Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. I can't believe we're still in the prelims. This is another banger of a fight. I'm very excited to see this fight, especially because Evloev, he's an undefeated fighter, and he's also very skilled when it comes to fighting. I know a lot of people hate on the guy and they disagree, and I totally understand, but we'll find out this weekend if Aljamain Sterling can defeat him. Now, I personally think that Evloev is going to walk out the victor in this fight. In fact, I ended up giving him a 70.07% probability of victory. And the prediction models, just looking at the stats alone, they actually agreed as well. They gave him a 70.47 probability of victory. That's just a little bit more confident, but I'm sticking with that 70% even. Now, statistically, let's first talk about what we see on paper. Movsar, he's 5 years younger than Aljamain Sterling. I know Sterling looks really young, but he's not actually that young. He's 35, kind of at that mid to late stage of anyone's professional fighting career. So Evloev, he's 5 years younger than him. He has a reach advantage of an inch here. He has a 3% higher striking defense. He lands 2.44 more takedowns on average, obviously a very strong point in Evloev's game. He also has a 19% higher takedown accuracy and a 26% higher takedown defense. And that's an interesting dynamic because usually Sterling, he does have some advantages in that grappling department, so it's going to be interesting to see him face off against Movsar. A lot of these fights are very high level, very technical, and just very fun fights that they've put together. Great dynamics between these fighters across the entire card. Now, let's take a look at Movsar's total record. Again, 18 wins, not a single loss. Now, take that with a grain of salt, but I'll give you my full research and analysis. First, let's break down those wins. 3 of those 18 wins were via KO/TKO, 4 of those were via submission, and 11 were decision victories. All in all, that gives him a 39% finish rate, but that does mean he's able to control 61% of fights, and that's something to keep in mind. Now, Movsar, he does have 2 first-round finishes. Obviously, he's not a major finisher. Recently, though, absolute dominance, of course, that 18-fight win streak. His most recent win was, in fact, in January of this year, but he hasn't been active for the rest of the year. Important to keep that in mind. But now let's talk about the stylistic advantages that I like in Movsar's game. And the first one, to no surprise, is going to be Movsar's grappling dominance. He's secured a ton of takedowns in just the few amount of fights that he's already had in the UFC. What the thing is, he has this really effective chain wrestling style, and that he's relentless in his persistent pursuit of those takedowns. He'll try and try again, even if the guy fails. I mean, he just keeps going for those takedowns. And not only that, but once he gets those, his ground control time is really impressive. He's accumulated a ton of ground control time, and this is where he gets a lot of hate. You know, a lot of people see that as boring. I'm very neutral. I'm just sharing with you guys my research, the logic, and the advantages that these fighters have. And the truth is, control does contribute to victories for fighters. So just keep that in mind when you're making your decisions. Try to put your emotions and bias aside when you're making these picks and decisions, or even when you're considering and breaking down a fight. Now, I will say Movsar, he has a bit of a size advantage here. I mean, the guy's a natural featherweight, and so he holds a bit more of an advantage compared to Sterling, who's, again, just keep in mind, he used to be a bantamweight. Sterling has moved up, and so that's just an important aspect, because you do have to consider the natural weight of guys, not the weight that they're able to get to, but just where their body is biologically comfortable at being. Now, Movsar, I really like his cardio and pace as a fighter as well. I mean, he's gone the distance in a lot of his fights, especially his UFC fights. In fact, I think all of them have gone the distance. Let me just fact check myself real quick. Yeah, all of his UFC fights have gone the distance. All of them have been unanimous decisions. There was just one split decision back in 2021. That was at UFC 257, that Poirier versus McGregor 2. But regardless, the guy, he has good cardio overall. He also has a very high volume takedown attempt style and that consistent pressure that he puts on fighters. I also really like what I see defensively out of him. I mean, his defensive capabilities really make him hard to hit, especially hit cleanly. So it's hard to wear him down as a fighter. He barely absorbs any strikes per minute, very low. And I like his maneuverability as well. And it's just his game plan with his grappling, it really allows him to avoid excessive strikes, and that's important. I like his striking output as well, although he doesn't lean heavily towards that, but still, he does have some good striking output skills as well. Not to stretch this one out too much, but bottom line, I'm leaning towards Movsar here. I think he's going to get the decision victory, nothing too fancy. But I don't think that Aljamain Sterling has what it takes to defeat Movsar. I know a lot of people would like Aljamain Sterling to prove him wrong. A lot of people hate both of these guys. I mean, you guys let me know what you think of this fight, but just logically speaking, no emotions, no bias, I think that Movsar will win this fight. For our prelim co-main event, very interesting to put it that way, we have Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo. This is a really good fight, by the way, another banger. For this fight, I ended up going with Themba Gorimbo. I ended up giving him a 69% probability of victory. Now, the prediction models generally agreed. They gave him about a 73% probability of victory when you weigh all those together. Now, the statistical reason why I'm picking Themba Gorimbo, keep in mind, statistically, he has a height advantage of 2 inches, a reach advantage of 2 inches, a 9% higher striking accuracy. That's really high of an advantage. He also absorbs 4 less strikes per minute. He has a 4% higher striking defense, while landing 3.9 more takedowns on average, with a 12% higher takedown accuracy and a 20% higher takedown defense. If you just look at what I've displayed here, you could see all the green advantages leaning towards Themba. So it's no surprise on paper and on statistical models, he is the dominant victor in this fight. Now, let's talk about his record here. Gorimbo has had 14 wins and only 4 losses. Now let's break down those wins real quick. Out of those 14 wins, 2 of those were KO/TKOs, 6 were submissions, and 6 were decision victories. Pretty balanced, giving him a 57% finishing rate. Now, out of his 4 losses, 1 was a KO/TKO loss, 2 were submission losses, and 1 was a decision loss. He's had 5 first-round finishes out of his 14 wins. Recently, he's been on a tear. He's won 4 of his last 5 fights. In fact, he's on a 4-fight win streak coming into this fight. A lot of momentum on his side, also a lot of motivation as well if you've heard him talk. Now, his most recent win was back in October of 2024, literally just a couple months ago, and his most recent loss was all the way back in February of 2023, so it's been a while, almost 2 years since this guy has lost. He's been on a tear since. I really like Themba Gorimbo's grappling dominance. I mean, he's shown really impressive wrestling skills, especially in his recent fights. I mean, he's landed a bunch of takedown attempts very accurately, even against someone like Niko Price. We saw them fight back in October of 2024, just recently on that Royval versus Tatsuro Taira card. And so we saw his ability to control opponents on the ground, not only in that fight, but just recently in general. He also fought Ramiz Brahimaj, and that was an interesting fight as well, where he got the unanimous decision as well. He secured like over 90% of those takedown attempts as well. I forget the specific number, but I know it was massive and dominant. So I think that kind of grappling skill, it's going to be crucial against a guy like Vicente Luque, who we've seen him be susceptible to takedowns in the past in his previous performances. So this is going to be an interesting dynamic. I also really like the improvement that I've seen in the striking of Gorimbo. Now, we saw him knock out Pete Rodriguez. That was within the first round. In just, I think it was like 30 seconds. And that really just showed that this guy has those hands. He has those heavy hands. And what I really like about Themba is that he's able to mix in his striking with those takedown attempts. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps your opponent guessing. And it also keeps them off balance. Now, zooming out a little bit, just psychologically, I like the momentum and confidence that Themba has. He's entering this fight with a 4-fight win streak, as we covered, and his recent performances, they've been pretty dominant. They've been increasingly dominant, so I like that continued improvement that I see. That means that he is taking his training seriously. He is improving and focusing on his weaknesses to improve over time. I really like that positive trajectory, especially as an analyst. I appreciate that in fighters, and that's what makes me more confident in picks. I think that he might also have a slight cardio advantage as well, especially because his wrestling heavy style, it allows him to control the pace of fights. I mean, he's shown the ability to maintain pressure throughout multiple rounds of fights, and if he can really drag Luque into deep waters, his conditioning could be a deciding factor in this fight. Now, Gorimbo is one of those guys that also has this element of surprise. I mean, he's kind of a new face in the UFC. He's only really been here in the last couple of years, or last couple of years, since 2023. And so I think that there's just a little bit more to learn about Themba. I mean, I don't think that we as fans or even his opponents have truly figured him out yet. As he continues to improve, there's going to be a lot more to his game that we're going to continue to learn. And so keep in mind, he's rapidly improved. And I don't think that Luque is going to be as familiar with Gorimbo's specific tendencies and techniques as he'll want to be. And so with all of that, I think that even though Vicente, I'll give him his props. I mean, he is a challenging opponent. He has high-level experience. I really do still like Themba's wrestling skills, his improving striking, and just his momentum overall. He's also very motivated. If you hear him talk, you could just tell he's passionate about fighting. His why is very, very strong as a fighter, and I can really appreciate that. All in all, I think that Themba's going to win here. I don't think he's going to get a finish. I think he's going to win via decision, and that's the bottom line for this fight. For the next fight, we have our featured prelim main event. That's Dominick Reyes versus Anthony Smith. Also a very interesting fight. I ended up going with Dominick Reyes for this fight. I ended up giving a very confident 77.31% probability victory, and that's all things considered. Now, the prediction models, they gave him a little bit more confidence. They ended up giving him about a 79% probability of victory. Now, the statistical reason why I'm picking Dominick Reyes here is because he's 2 years younger. He does have that reach advantage of an inch that he uses very well. Not only that, but he lands 1.63 more strikes per minute than his opponent. He has a 1% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 0.85 less strikes per minute with a 2% higher striking defense and a 2% higher takedown accuracy as well. And lastly, he has a 30% higher takedown defense as well. A lot of statistical advantages. Again, one of those fights where you see a lot of green statistically on one side of the fighter, and that is Dominick Reyes if you look at the screen right now. Now, let's take a look at Dominick Reyes' total record. Just to keep in mind, he's had 13 wins and only 4 losses. Sometimes it's hard to really keep that in mind, that he's only had 4 losses, because a lot of them were recent in his professional fighting career, and he was very dominant early on. But he still has a long way to go. I mean, I feel like people discredit fighters way too quickly in MMA. I mean, it's a cold sport. I digress, but let's break down those 13 wins. 8 of those wins were KO/TKOs, 2 victories were via submission, and 3 were decision victories. All in all, that does give Reyes a 77% finishing rate. Let's break down his losses real quick. 3 of them were KO/TKOs, which is a little bit concerning, I do acknowledge, but it's still a low number when you consider someone's fighting career. He also has 1 decision loss, and that's it. He does have 10 first-round finishes out of his 13 wins, so you're in danger in round 1 with a guy like Dominick Reyes. But even in that Jon Jones fight, I mean, he carried himself very well throughout that entire fight. And I know a lot of us miss that level of Dominick Reyes. We haven't really seen that style since then, but I still think that he does have advantages in him, at least to propel him to a victory over a guy like Anthony Smith. We'll talk about the stylistic stuff in 1 second, but just to talk about momentum, I will fully acknowledge Dominick Reyes has only won 1 of his last 5 fights. That is very concerning from a momentum standpoint, but he is snapping that and coming off of a victory into this fight, and maybe that is the pivot that we need. Now, his most recent win, again, it was earlier this year, back in June of 2024, where he finally snapped it. His most recent loss was back in November of 2022. He took time after that to really collect himself as a fighter. Now, the things I like about Dominick Reyes over a guy like Anthony Smith, it would have to be first and foremost his striking skills. I do like his striking skills more than I like Anthony Smith's. Not only offensively, but also his defensive striking, which isn't really talked about much, but defensively, he is a good striker as well. We're talking about those counter punches and those counter kicks that really make him stand out. Now, with that being said, I also like his power and his finishing ability as a fighter. I mean, he has a lot of KOs/TKOs like we talked about, especially early on in his career. Now, it really depends on what version of Dominick Reyes we get. Do we get that June 2024 Dominick Reyes, or do we get that February 2020 through November 2022 Dominick Reyes that was really struggling and just repeatedly getting destroyed? But if you look at who he's fought, I mean, he fought Yuri back in 2021 when Yuri was on the rise and absolutely killing it. He also fought Jan Blachowicz, and that was back in 2020 when Jan was absolutely dominant and killing it. And he also lost to Ryan Spann. That was back in 2022. So I think Dominick Reyes has just fought some high-level competition in this light heavyweight division, and he struggled with those guys. And maybe that Jon Jones loss really knocked his confidence a little bit as well. I mean, not to focus too heavily on the psychological aspects, but a lot of people feel that Dominick Reyes won that fight against Jon Jones. A lot of people disagree. I mean, I respect whatever you guys think, but my point is that could have an effect on you psychologically, and that's all I'm trying to say. And so I think that those are things that Dominick Reyes can shake off, and maybe he already kind of shook it off back in June, and now we're going to see the continuation of that pivoting trend. Now, just to kind of get back on track here, another thing I like about Dominick Reyes is his defensive wrestling. I mean, he does a really good job of defending takedowns, and Smith, I mean, he doesn't really defend a lot of takedowns, or he doesn't defend it as well as Reyes does. And so I think that Reyes, he has that solid takedown defense, and that's going to be very important in neutralizing any kind of grappling attempts that Smith may do. It's just one of the paths that Reyes can shut down that Smith will not have access to. I also like the speed and athleticism that Reyes has. I mean, keep in mind, this guy used to be like a college football player, and he does bring that athleticism, and it translates very well into the octagon. And then also keep in mind where Anthony Smith is at in his professional fighting career. He's definitely at the late stage of it. I like that recent performance that Dominick Reyes has, and I think that he's really good at exploiting weaknesses. I mean, especially when you consider something like leg kicks. Anthony Smith, he's shown some vulnerability to leg kicks in recent fights, and then given Dominick Reyes' striking skills and his ability to bring a lot of variety to his attacks, I think that those are the kind of things that he can exploit in the weaknesses of his opponent's game, such as Smith's in this fight. All in all, just to kind of summarize, I think Dominick Reyes is going to win. I think he's actually going to catch Anthony Smith, and this will be hopefully a pivot in Dominick Reyes' professional fighting career, and we're going to see him continue to turn things around and continue winning. I expect Dominick Reyes to pull off a KO/TKO victory. I don't think it's going to be very hard for him, respectfully, against an opponent like Anthony Smith. That's what I'm expecting, and that's what I think logically should happen. But it is MMA, and you know that sometimes it just doesn't go the way that we want it to go, so we'll just roll with the punches. For the next fight, we have Nate Landwehr versus Dooho Choi, and this is a good fight as well. I ended up picking Nate for this fight, but I gave him a very narrow 52% probability of victory here. Now the prediction models, they just about agreed. They gave Nate a 49.93% probability of victory. So this, statistically, it seems like the models are saying that this is definitely a toss-up. Looking at everything outside of stats, I ended up leaning towards Nate here. Now, the statistical reasons why I like Nate: he has a reach advantage of 2 inches here. He lands 1.84 more strikes per minute. He lands 0.25 more takedowns on average. He has a 4% higher takedown accuracy, a 39% higher takedown defense, and he lands 0.2 more submissions on average. Let's take a look at Nate's total record. 18 wins, 5 losses. Out of those 18 wins, 9 of those were KO/TKOs. 2 were submissions, and 7 have been decision victories, all in all giving him a 61% finishing rate. Let's break down his losses now. Out of his 5 losses, 2 of them were KO/TKOs, 1 was a submission loss, and 2 were decision losses. Now Nate also has 3 first-round finishes out of his 18 wins, but more importantly, recently he's won 4 of his last 5 fights, and that is pretty good. And in fact, he's coming off of a win into this fight as well. His most recent win was earlier this year, back in March of 2024. His most recent loss was mid last year in June of 2023. Stylistically speaking, Nate's one of those guys that's super aggressive. He does high pressure when it comes to fights, and he does it very well. He has that relentless style approach, and I think that will overwhelm Choi, especially if Nate can push that fast pace as soon as the fight begins. Nate has that ability to constantly just move forward, throw volume, and that's going to be difficult for Choi to handle, especially over the course of 3 rounds. Not only that, but Nate is really good with wrestling and grappling as well. Now, both of these fighters like to strike, but Nate has shown some better wrestling skills in different fights. He does average like a takedown every single 3 rounds, and he does have a pretty decent success rate compared to Choi, who doesn't have a lot of takedowns recorded per 15 minutes. He has like 0.13 or so. And so if Nate can kind of mix in those takedowns, I think it really could disrupt Choi's rhythm, and it can really allow Nate to control that fight. Now, in terms of durability and cardio, I think that Nate, he's one of those guys that's really known for his toughness and his ability to push that fast pace for 3 rounds. And so his cardio and durability, they're going to be key advantages in this matchup, especially if he can drag Choi into really deep waters in those later rounds. Nate has a very high average fight time, whereas Choi he averages 2 minutes less than Nate does, at about 7 minutes and 30 seconds compared to Nate's 9 minutes and 20 seconds. And so Nate does have a proven history with longer fights. Now, I do like Nate's activity. He's been more active recently compared to Choi. And so, because Choi, he's only really fought twice since 2019. And a lot of that has to do with like his military experience and the injuries that Choi faced. And so that more recent experience that Nate has is going to give him a bit of an edge when it comes to just staying sharp as a fighter, right? Now, the last thing that I want to touch base on that I really like, that I think sets Nate apart here, is his striking volume. I mean, he's known as a good striker, and to respect Dooho Choi, he's also known as a very skilled striker, especially when he was very, very active. He would throw a lot of significant strikes. But Nate, I think that he's going to be able to maintain that high level of output with that level of aggression, and that, I think, will have an impact on what the judges say about this fight, and it's also going to overwhelm Choi's defense as well. And so by leveraging those advantages, I do think that Nate is going to take this fight. My final prediction is Nate via KO/TKO. I think we're going to see a knockout in this fight. For the next fight, we have another banger of a fight. We have the all-action Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. For this fight, I ended up going with Bryce Mitchell. I'm going to give him a 76% probability of victory. The prediction models also agree with me here. They gave him a 74% probability of victory. Now, the statistical advantages that Bryce has here: he has a height advantage of 1 inch. He's 6 years younger than Kron. He also has a 14% higher striking accuracy while absorbing 5.19 less strikes per minute, with a 5% higher striking defense, landing 2.98 more takedowns on average, with a 16% higher takedown accuracy, while also landing 1.1 more submissions on average. Take a look at the screen right now and you see all the green towards Bryce Mitchell, and that's why the statistical models love him. And also, because of that, mixed with the stylistic advantages he has, and he's able to translate those stats very well in his game plan, I ended up going with him as well. First, let's talk about Bryce's total record. 16 wins and only 3 losses. Keep that in mind. Out of his 16 wins, 9 of those were submissions. That's extremely impressive. 7 of those were decision victories, which gives him a 56% finish rate. Out of his 3 losses, 1 was a KO/TKO, 2 were submission losses, and he doesn't have any decision losses. He has 8 first-round finishes out of his 16 wins. That's 50% of his victories coming within the very first round. He's also been on a tear recently overall. He's won 3 of his last 5 fights, but unfortunately he is coming off of a loss into this specific fight, but he's still done well overall. His most recent win was back in September of 2023, and his most recent loss was in December of 2023. What I really like about Bryce Mitchell, it first has to be his grappling control and his takedowns, and that's to no surprise if you've seen any of his recent fights. He's really able to utilize his wrestling background, which he has a very solid background when it comes to wrestling. He uses that edge in his takedowns and his top control. In fact, we've already talked about his stats, but what those stats really mean is that he's able to dictate where the fight takes place, he's able to accumulate effective control time, and he scores those points that count when the judges make their decisions, and he's also able to neutralize any kind of submission attempts from the bottom from his opponents, and I think that that's going to neutralize the advantage that Gracie might have, or one of the strong points of Gracie's game here. Now, what I also like about Bryce, which kind of is underrated sometimes, it's his striking output and his defense. Now, both of these fighters really prefer grappling, if I'm being honest, but Mitchell has shown some better striking metrics on paper and during fights, and it's only improving over time. And I think that Mitchell does have that advantage in those stand-up exchange moments, and he has the ability to mix in strikes with those takedown attempts, which makes me lean towards him more. Now, I also like the cardio and pace of Mitchell. If you take a look at both of these guys' average fight time, Mitchell has a slightly longer fight time than Gracie does. It's just shy of a minute longer on average. And so really, his relentless grappling style and his higher striking volume, that kind of translates to superior cardio. I mean, not 100%, but you get what I'm trying to say here. Mitchell's really good at being able to push a very grueling pace when it comes to fighters. I mean, he's one of those relentless type of guys, and that's gonna wear Gracie down over 3 rounds. That's the logical take here. If he can maintain his grappling intensity late into the fight, then this is Mitchell's fight all day. I also really like the recent activity and momentum that we've seen from Mitchell compared to Gracie. I mean, Gracie, his last fight, it was a loss, I think, back in like 2019. He did have that loss back in May of 2023 and that Sterling versus Cejudo card, UFC 288. But, I mean, he hasn't been the most active guy. It was that 2023 loss, then a 2019 loss, a 2019 win, that was back in February, and then it was back in 2016, 15, and 14. I mean, that was a long time ago. The guy's now 36 years old. And so I like what I see from Mitchell. I think Mitchell is the more versatile fighter. He mixes in that striking and wrestling really well. He adapts his strategy. He's young, and he utilizes that athleticism, that speed, that power. He has better recovery between rounds. I've noticed that in his fights. He's more durable as a fighter. For all of those reasons, and probably more, I'm leaning towards Bryce Mitchell here. I think he's going to get the victory via decision, and that's the bottom line for this fight. For the next fight, we have a very interesting rematch with Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov. For this fight, I did end up going with Ciryl Gane, and I do think that that's the logical pick, although I do have my reservations with a guy like Ciryl Gane, especially because we've seen him struggle with the higher level competition in heavyweights. He's done very well early on back in like that 2020, 2021 era, but then he started struggling a little bit when he faced Francis and John Jones and just high-level competition. He would go on to defeat Sergey Spivak back in September of 2023, and he has not been active since. So I do hold my reservations against Ciryl Gane, but specifically in this rematch and in this matchup, I think it's very obvious that Ciryl Gane should win. And I say should because it's MMA, and you know how this game goes. But let's talk about this fight. All in all, I give Ciryl Gane a 75% probability of victory. The prediction models also agree right there. They give him a 75.35% probability of victory. The statistical things that Ciryl Gane has the advantage in, and you could see a lot of green on your screen right now towards Ciryl Gane's side. So he does have a lot of advantages. He's 2 years younger. He has a reach advantage of an inch. He lands 0.36 more strikes per minute with a 3% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 0.81 less strikes per minute with a 8% higher striking defense. He also lands 0.13 more takedowns on average, and he lands 0.3 more submissions on average. Now, Ciryl Gane, his total record is 12 wins and only 2 losses, and those 2 losses were to the highest level of competition in the heavyweight division. That's Francis Ngannou and John Jones. But let's break down his 12 wins. 6 of those were KO/TKOs, 3 were submission victories, and 3 were decision victories, which does give him a pretty respectable 75% finish rate. His only 2 losses, 1 was a submission loss, 1 was a decision loss. He does have 3 first-round finishes out of his 12 wins, but he's definitely not a first-round finisher for most of his wins. Recently, he's won 3 of his last 5 fights. He's done pretty decent overall, and recently he is coming off of that win against Sergey Spivak, and that was back in late 2023. Most recent win, again, September 2023. Most recent loss back in March of 2023, earlier last year. Now, they fought before already back in 2021, and Ciryl Gane ended up winning via unanimous decision. That was on a UFC Fight Night Gane versus Volkov in June 2021. He ended up winning in that fight, and for obvious reasons, that's going to give him some psychological confidence, and it's going to put the momentum in Ciryl Gane's favor. But let's talk about the other stylistic advantages that Ciryl Gane holds in general over a guy like Alexander Volkov. First and foremost, it's the technical superiority. Obviously, it doesn't work against guys like John Jones or Francis Ngannou, but hear me out. Gane, he does have technical skills, and I think that that's going to be an advantage in this fight. You could see that in the stats, but you could also see it in the way he fights, and that kind of striking efficiency that he has, it's going to be very crucial in outpointing a guy like Volkov over the course of this fight. I also like Ciryl Gane's defensive skills overall. I think he's one of those fighters that doesn't absorb a lot of fights. He's pretty effective in his defense when it comes to fights. His striking defense, of course. Compared to Volkov, at least, I mean, he's a little bit harder to hit compared to Volkov is what I'm trying to say. Now, I also really like Gane's agility and movement. He's pretty fluid in the octagon, especially when things are going right and things are going in his favor. And that's pretty unusual for a guy that's in the heavyweight division, but that's a key advantage that he holds. He has to be able to maintain distance here and kind of move like a middleweight, and I think that he will be able to do that, and he's going to frustrate Volkov and make it difficult for him to land his powerful strikes. I do like the cardio as well. Ciryl Gane, he does have a higher average fight time compared to Volkov. It's about 1.5 minutes more than Volkov does at 14 minutes and 10 seconds versus Volkov's 12 minutes and 50 seconds. So you could say that Gane, he's used to those longer fights, and that's good. He's also pretty good at tiring his opponents out, especially when it comes to the later rounds, and especially when it comes to those heavyweights. They tire out pretty quickly. Ciryl Gane isn't usually one of those guys. He's also versatile as a fighter. He has a well-rounded skill set. I like his striking and grappling abilities, minus that John Jones fight, but I digress. But I like what I see overall. I also like the fact that these guys have faced off before, and Ciryl Gane did end up the victor in that fight. Again, psychological edge also provides him a pretty good blueprint for success in this rematch. I also like Gane's recent performance compared to Volkov's. Now, I know Volkov, he's coming off like a 4-fight win streak into this fight, but, you know, I will say that Gane has shown impressive striking in his victories, his recent victories, compared to Volkov, at least in my humble opinion. All of those advantages that Ciryl Gane has, I think, should give him the victory. And I'm talking about his superior striking accuracy, his defensive skills, his agility, his ability to outmaneuver, and maybe even outlast a guy like Volkov. I think he's going to get the victory. So bottom line, verdict for this fight, it's going to be Ciryl Gane via decision. I don't think we get the finish, but I do see a tactical fight playing out, and Ciryl Gane just, outclassing Volkov. For the next fight, we have the People's Main Event, otherwise known as UFC 310's co-main event. This is Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Gary. For this fight, I am going for Shavkat Rakhmonov. This is a very interesting fight because you see the stat advantages mixed with both of these fighters, but also both of these guys are undefeated, and they're big names in this division, whether you like them or not, or whatever reservations you may have about either guy. They're both very big names, and one of those O's have to go, as people would say. In this fight, I ended up going with Shavkat Rakhmonov. I gave him a 69.37% probability of victory. Prediction models generally agree. They gave him a 67.04% probability of victory. Now first, let's talk about the stat advantages that Shavkat Rakhmonov has in this matchup. He has a reach advantage of 3 inches. He has a 6% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 0.76 less strikes per minute while landing 0.72 more takedowns on average, and he has a 31% higher takedown defense while landing 1.5 more submissions on average as well. His total record, 18 wins, not a single loss. Out of those 18 wins, 8 of those were KOs/TKOs, 10 were submissions, no decision victories. That gives him a very scary 100% finish rate in his professional fighting career. He's been on a crazy streak. His most recent win was back in December of 2023, so he has not been active in 2024, but he's done very, very well in his fighting career. Let's talk about the stylistic advantages that Rakhmonov has. The first thing that I would like to mention is his grappling superiority. Rakhmonov, he has a lot of grappling skills, and that's going to be his true significant advantage in this fight. He has great wrestling skills and submission ability, and that's, I mean, we've seen people compare him to the likes of Khabib, and whatever you think of Khabib or Islam, that's up to you, but just keeping it very logical, Shavkat does have that dominant factor in him, a lot, very similar to those kind of guys. A lot of his wins have been via submission. He has a very deadly ground game, and that's going to pose an extreme threat to Gary. Now, he also has a really good finishing ability as well. Keep in mind, 100% finishing rate like we talked about. He's ended all of his 18 professional fights before the final round, right? He's just very good at capitalizing on opportunities and finishing fights in very different ways, whether it's by submission or a knockout, and I really like that. He also has great experience against high-level competition. Both of these guys, of course, are undefeated, but Rakhmonov has faced just higher ranked and more technical opponents in the UFC. He's defeated Neil Magny and Geoff Neal, and I think that his experience against those tougher opponents, it could give him a bit of an edge when it comes to high pressure situations. He's also versatile as a fighter. I mean, he's good on the feet and on the ground, and it just gives him multiple pathways to victory, and that's exactly what I like to see in a fighter that I'm picking. He's also very durable as a fighter. He has that ability to come back in fights when he's facing adversity, and that's going to be crucial in this 5-round contest type of fight. He's also very motivated for that title shot, and so I think that he's going to be the next guy who takes a crack at the championship. Let me be honest with you guys. And that kind of incentive, it's making him look right through Gary towards that finish line, that championship. And so Gary, I don't think he just has what it takes to really pose a threat. Let's talk about Gary's advantages real quick, and let's see how that matches up against Rakhmonov. One of the things that Gary does well is his striking precision. I mean, he's known for his technical striking and his accuracy with that, but Rakhmonov has superior defense. He barely absorbs any strikes, and I think that that's going to really frustrate Gary's striking game and neutralize that advantage. Another thing that Gary does well, he has an unorthodox style. I mean, he's very creative and he has unexpected attacks, and that's why a lot of people compare him to guys like Conor McGregor. Whether I think that's true or not is neither here nor there, but you get what I'm trying to say. Now, Rakhmonov, he has experience against that top level of competition, and he's also adaptable. Keep in mind, like I said earlier, I think that that's going to help him neutralize this advantage that Gary has. It's going to help him read and counter Gary's unorthodox moves. I mean, he has sparring experience with Gary, so keep that in mind. And that's going to provide him some insights into Gary's tendencies. I don't think a lot of people are touching base on that, but that's very important to keep in mind right there. Now, in terms of momentum and confidence, I mean, Gary is also riding a huge wave of momentum. He's had a lot of recent victories as well with notable opponents. But Rakhmonov, I mean, he also carries the same thing, so I can't say that that's a huge advantage that Gary has. Let's talk takedown defense. Now, Gary, he's shown some good takedown defense in his UFC career. He keeps fights standing most of the time, and that's where he excels. But Rakhmonov, he has a very high-level grappling skill set, again, comparable to the likes of Khabib or Islam. I'm not saying he's them, but he does have very dominant grappling overall, and I think that that's going to pose a threat to Gary, regardless of Gary's takedown defense. And you could also make an argument that both of these guys have really good fight IQ and adaptability. This is a very high-level and interesting fight, but bottom line, I think that I've made a decent enough case as to support my decision in giving Rakhmonov a 69% probability of victory. I'm going to go with him, and I actually think that Rakhmonov is going to get a submission against Gary. I think that his grappling advantage is just too much for Gary to handle, and Gary's really going to get tested here. If not the submission victory, I could definitely rely on Rakhmonov getting a decision victory. I don't necessarily think he knocks Gary out. That's just common sense. Although that would be pretty interesting. Bottom line, Shavkat Rakhmonov is your winner. Should be via submission, could be via decision. For the next fight, we have our main event. I'm very excited to cover this fight. We have Alexander Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. For this fight, I did end up going with Alexander Pantoja. Unfortunately, I couldn't run both of these guys through the prediction models, and that's because of the debut that Kai Asakura is having. Now, you're probably wondering, if you haven't already known, or maybe you're a little bit new to the sport of MMA, why is Kai Asakura just making a debut, but he's facing the champion Alexander Pantoja at the main event? Well, it's because Kai Asakura was actually champion at Ryzen, which, if you don't know what that is, I highly recommend you look into what Ryzen is. It is one of the highest level MMA promotions in Japan. Very, very high level. Kai Asakura was a champion there. He actually gave up his championship recently to jump over to UFC, and now he's getting a chance to face high-level Alexander Pantoja. And that's interesting for many, many reasons. Not only stylistically, not only technically, but also just, and not only fame or popularity as well, and momentum, but the key also is you're talking about two guys from two of the best promotions in the world, champions at that, facing each other and just seeing who is the best. We don't get this very often. I mean, you do get guys like within the UFC climbing up, or guys from other companies that move over to the UFC climbing up and then becoming champion, whether they're from Glory, kickboxing, or whatever the case. But this is kind of unique, and so it's pretty interesting. Some people don't think Kai deserve it. Some people think Kai definitely deserve it. We're going to break all of it down here. But first, let's talk about the statistical advantages, or at least from what we know that Alexander Pantoja has. Alexander Pantoja, he has a 67-inch reach. He's 34 years old. Kai Asakura is 31 years old. Now, we don't have a lot of stats with Kai Asakura, but we do have Alexander Pantoja's stats here. He's about 50% accurate when it comes to his striking. He absorbs almost 4 strikes per minute. He has a 50% striking defense. His takedown average is at 2.61. He's accurate 47% of the time with his takedowns. He has a 68% takedown defense. He lands 0.8 submissions on average, and the odds are in Alexander Pantoja's favor. Let's take a look at Pantoja's total record. 28 wins and only 5 losses. Out of his 28 wins, 8 of those were KO/TKOs, 10 were submissions, and 10 were decision victories, giving him a 64.3% finish rate. Let's break down his losses. All of those 5 losses were decision losses. He does have 10 first-round finishes out of his 28 wins, so he can get it done within the first round. He's shown it time and time again, but he can also get the victory in the second, third, fourth, fifth round, whatever he needs to do. He's currently on a 6-fight win streak, which is very, very impressive. He's faced very high-level competition, and he's really shut off a lot of haters, and he's an underrated fighter. A lot of people don't give him the technical skills, the credit that he deserves when it comes to his technical skills or his grappling skills and things like that. His most recent win was back in May of this year, and his most recent loss was all the way back in July of 2020. So it's been a long time since this guy's lost. But let's talk about all the stylistic advantages and disadvantages and how Pantoja can neutralize any of the advantages that Asakura brings to the table here. When it comes to Pantoja's advantages, the first thing that you have to keep in mind is his experience and his proven track record. I mean, he has a wealth of experience against very high-level UFC competition. He's defeated the likes of Brandon Moreno, Alex Perez, Matt Schnell, and I mean, those guys, very, very high level. And because he's defeated those guys, he has shown and proven himself to perform at that very high level. And that experience is going to give him a huge edge over Asakura, who's just now making his UFC debut. I mean, Asakura's faced some tough guys, but he has not faced UFC level competition. Now, one of the things that I have to mention about Kai Asakura, and I'm just going to rip this band-aid off, the guy has had 3 championship level fights, or he's actually had 4, sorry, of which he's lost 3, and he's only won the most recent one against Juan Archuleta. That was in December of 2023. But I think it's very important to keep in mind, in 2019, December 2019, Kai Asakura faced Manel Kape in Ryzen, where he lost to Manel Kape via TKO, in the second round. And then in December 2020, he earned again a title shot, and he lost to Kyoji, and that was within the very first round. He lost in Ryzen. Then he again gets 3 wins in a row to get another title shot against Hiromasa and he ends up losing to him via unanimous decision in the 3rd round. And so every time he gets a championship level fight, even though it's in Ryzen, or even being in Ryzen, he seemed to have struggled a lot. Only recently he came out on top and he won the championship finally. So I can't say this guy has faced as high level of competition as Pantoja has. Pantoja has the more proven track record. And that's not to say that Asakura isn't talented. He can prove the entire world wrong this weekend. And it's going to be very interesting to see both of these guys put it all on the line. But so far, from what we've seen logically, Pantoja holds the crown there. Now, Pantoja, he's also a very well-rounded fighter. I mean, he has strong abilities in striking and grappling. Keep in mind, this guy's a black belt in BJJ. He has a lot of submission victories, but he's also really good, and he's had a lot of knockout victories as well. He's extremely versatile. Again, probably one of the most underrated fighters in the UFC all time. One of the, I'm not saying the most. Now, he also has championship level conditioning. He's a seasoned UFC champion at this point. I mean, Pantoja's ready for a 5-round fight, and he's ready to do very well in all 5 rounds. He's one of those fighters that you think could pretty much go 20 rounds. Very high level of a fighter. He does relentless pressure. He's really durable as well, and he's able to absorb punishment. He looks tired at times, but he's still very effective as a fighter, and I love to see that. He has this like legendary level toughness, very challenging opponent. But let's now talk about Asakura's advantages here. Asakura has a lot of power and finishing ability. I mean, he's known for his knockout power, and he's known to finish fights very quickly. I think that Pantoja can neutralize this in a few ways. One, Pantoja, he's going to have to lean on his superior grappling. He's going to have to take this fight on the ground, where Asakura's striking power is much less of a threat. He also has to employ his defensive skills and his durability in order to weather any kind of early storm that Asakura is going to throw towards him, and he has to push Asakura into the deeper waters. He has to, show him that this is his house. He also has to use his footwork and distance management in order to avoid Asakura's power shots. Now, Asakura, one of the advantages he has is his overall size advantage. I mean, Asakura is actually moving down from bantamweight, and he has this like height and reach advantage here. Pantoja, he's going to be able to counter this by closing the distance very quickly and working on the clinch. He has to use his superior speed and agility in order to outmaneuver a larger opponent like Asakura, and he has to really lean towards those leg kicks and body shots to get rid of any kind of reach advantage that Asakura has. And I think that those are things that Pantoja does very, very well. Another thing that I really like about Asakura's game is his unpredictability as a fighter. Asakura, I mean, he presents a lot of unfamiliar challenges to a guy like Pantoja. Pantoja doesn't have a lot of information on a guy like Asakura, but what Pantoja can do is he can really lean on his experience that he already has. He has to be a little bit patient, especially within that 1st and 2nd round of this fight. He has to use his fight IQ and adapt to this fight. Let the victory come towards him instead of just aggressively chasing for it, especially with a guy like Asakura. He has to really fight reactively rather than proactively. That's what I'm trying to say. He has to implement a game plan. And I think Pantoja can leverage his experience. He can leverage his well-rounded skill set and his championship level mentality. He has the tools that he needs to overcome Asakura's strengths and successfully defend his title here. I think Asakura is going to prove he is very, very talented, but I think Pantoja is going to ultimately prove why he's the current champion of this division. And so don't believe the extreme hype. Of course, they're trying to market this pay-per-view. Keep in mind, Pantoja, he's a proven fighter. I mean, he's like the S&P 500 when it comes to the stock market. So just to reel it back in, my final verdict for this fight is Pantoja to win via decision. I don't think Pantoja is going to get the finish, any kind of finish here. I think that it's going to go to decision. I think Asakura is going to be a huge name in this division, but ultimately Pantoja gets it done here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will upload the betting video in a couple days on this channel, so check that out. Look at the insights. If you guys want to see some really good underdogs that I like for this card, I'm going to have those on there. I'm also going to have logical bets. I'm going to have the most inexpensive favorites that are likely to win. And so really what that video is to highlight opportunities for you guys, and what this video is logical picks that most likely will win. I'm about 70% accurate when it comes to these picks on early prelims, and the main event for over a year now, thanks to you all supporting me.
continuing to support me. If you're new, please like and subscribe. Thank you for being here. Leave a comment. Let's start talking about UFC 310. Let's get hype. Thank you guys once again, and see you guys in the next video.
And with that, those are all of the fights for this weekend's event. I hope you all enjoyed the analysis and that your bets hit. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe, as it'll help keep me motivated in creating these videos. Running this data, analysis, prediction models, and creating charts and graphs takes hours every day and week, so your support is always appreciated. Please also check out my Patreon if you'd like to support me through there. There's a $10 a month contribution option and a premium $20 a month option, which comes with early access to all of the analysis from this video, as well as promising underdogs, favorites, prop bets, and all of the extra data analysis and stats as well. This analysis, information, and these stats will help you with your bets, and it'll help support my efforts to continue providing and expanding content for you all. So please check out that Patreon if you want to show me some love and help me out there. Thank you all once again for watching, and as always, see you guys in the next one.